Hello, and welcome to this video that continues our series of videos for MTA and Campus Commonwealth Academy session meeting in January 2014. I hope that you've had a great period of Christmas rest and refreshment and of drawing near to God. We hope this is going to be one short video, probably shorter than it deserves considering the richness and significance of the Epistle to the Romans, but it's necessary for the situations that we find ourselves right now. The author of this writing is, of course, Paul the Apostle. It's been regarded as a Pauline epistle for just about all of its existence, and even among the more, you could say, contentious scholars, even they don't argue against the authorship of Paul. The date is interesting to determine. In 16 verse 23, there's a mention of Gaius as his host. Which, if that's cross-referenced with 1 Corinthians 1:14, it seems to indicate that this was written in Corinth around 56 to 57 AD. It may have been written at another city, but it seems most likely that it was written in Corinth. The recipients, as he states quite explicitly, are Judeans and Greeks in the Roman Church. To those with the Jewish background and those, of course, who had Hellenistic or Greco-Roman backgrounds but are called Greeks. So he's definitely making an allusion to their cultural standing. The genre is very much of a Greco-Roman letter, but it blends a lot of different styles. For short, I mean, at the end, it sounds like a commendation letter where he's addressing brothers and sisters directly. And commending them for a number of different actions. There's also a protreptic, is what it's called, style of writing, which is usually it starts out with a form of dissuasion or refutation, and it does start right on a kind of negative tone or argumentative tone. And then it leads to a demonstration. So it goes from dissuading the audience about something or trying to prove a negative point to then trying to demonstrate a certain point, and then ends with something called paranesis, right, with ethical, direct, personal appeal to action, which we know is the case in Romans 12 and 13. But I'll break down the letter into 3 sections, which of course each can be subdivided into more sections that would get at some of the more minute elements of his argument, which is a really beautiful and powerful argument, but it's one that definitely requires our attention. Of course, you don't have to be a scholar. None of the things that we're studying here require somebody necessarily to be a scholar. But as somebody said, you don't have to be a person of the mind to read the gospel, but it's going to take all the mind that you've got. So it does start out with an epistolary opening in Romans 1 through 15, and there he makes sweeping, powerful statements about the content of the faith. In many ways, he sort of encapsulates or summarizes the faith in a few short statements about the resurrection of Jesus and his declaration as the Son of God, and it also he states his intention to call his readers to the obedience of faithfulness, right, or to the obedience of the faith. Right, and that's his opening. The next section, 1:16 to 4:25. Is this section on dissuasion. It tries to expose Gentile rule, social life, relationships, and then Judean covenantal infidelity, right, as causing both to fall sorely, I should say, short of the glory of God, or the radiance of God, the goodness of God. We know, of course, by reading Romans 1, which definitely catches you and keeps your attention with its accusations of, as it says, unnatural relations between men and women and many other offenses, many of which were, I guess, disgracefully enough, something that the rulers, the emperors of Rome, were guilty of doing. And I think in many ways it's trying to also make that point, is if your rulers and your leaders are behaving like this, what does this say about your entire social order and your way of life? So it's most certainly a very incisive statement to make. And then he doesn't leave the Gentiles, so to speak, alone. He then moves on to his fellow Judeans and claims that they too have no excuse. They've received the oracles of God, the promises, but they themselves are not violating it. I mean, they're not fulfilling it, but instead are violating it. So this leads towards the end of chapter 3 to the beginning of chapter 4 to a statement that there has to be another basis for righteousness, because none of these groups, both the Judean and the Gentile or the Greek, can really stand on their own 2 feet and claim confidently to have fulfilled their own standards. In one case, the Namu, the law of the Greco-Roman social order and political order, which was held at that time as being the height of civilization, they are not fulfilling it. Interestingly enough, of course, it states that even in some cases, those who don't even know the law, whether it's the Roman law or even, of course, the Judaic law, the law of Moses, some are fulfilling it in heart. Some don't even know about it, and they could fulfill it. So he tries to make it clear that, look, we are aware that we're supposed to strive and fulfill a certain way of life, a life that God intended to bring harmony and peace and joy and love. Whatever it is that we've got, that justice or righteousness is not being fulfilled. So he leads to a rather amazing set of statements at the end of Romans 3 that says that there's another basis of righteousness or justice, and it comes through grace or generosity. It comes through faithfulness or loyalty. It goes away from the works of the law for the Judeans, or the doing right, or this right, or claiming that the law that produces righteousness, and instead it's something else. It's got a completely different foundation. And when we get to 4:25, right, that's a section that of course directs our attention to Abraham. It leads to this Abrahamic example of faith as justice or righteousness that comes through promise, not law. And this, he believes, Paul that is, believes applies to both Jews and Gentiles, because Abraham was reckoned as just or righteous before the law was around, and so therefore applies to Gentiles who don't listen or want to fulfill the law of God, and who in their case aren't fulfilling their own law. So it actually rests now on a gift, on a promise, not on setting up this kind of obedience or adherence to this legal code or this law or this other right system. So the Jew and the Gentile have to be opened up to a promise. In 3:1-4 and 3:5-8, there's 2 objections that Paul already anticipates. One is that, look, if we're not fulfilling the law, then that means that God is dumping us, but God said that he would be faithful to us. So maybe you're charging that God isn't faithful. And then verse 5-8, he argues that, look, if God is faithful, then that shows we're not morally indifferent, right? That is, they are not the kinds of people who promote the statement, let us do evil that good may come. Right? It's one of those statements that, hey, if we're not going to fulfill the law, if we're not going to be just or righteous, then hey, let's just keep on this route so we can show how great God is. He's saying, look, this is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that if the Jews and the Gentiles have fallen short of fulfilling the intent or heart of the law, that does not mean that then you just should be, well, morally indifferent. Instead, he moves on to another argument. And in this case, he starts to now positively demonstrate another avenue, another route to the justice that God seeks, to the righteousness that God seeks. He starts out right there in 5 verse 1 that he seeks peace with God through Jesus the Messiah. He sets up his argument through that pass, starting with chapter 5, then going to chapter 6, and going to chapter 7. In chapter 4, of course, he introduces this idea of Adam, that not only should they be concerned about Abraham, but this is also something that should concern all of humanity. It should introduce anyone who's rooted in Adam, who's rooted to the first human, for the first humans. So in Christ it means death to sin. They actually do care about sin, and in fact, in the Messiah, we find a new route to live, to live justly. So it's not like now we're taking our privileged forgiveness and just running off with it and cheapening it, but instead it's actually a new platform for a new life that does not depend on the fulfillment, that is the works of the law for the Judean, and therefore is one that's actually built on faithfulness, on generosity or grace. So it means that death to sin in chapter 6, death to the law in chapter 7, verse 4, and therefore they're freed from condemnation, Romans 8. So instead of being people who are concerned with the fulfilling of this law that leads to injustice, and in fact, it was the law as it was applied and lived by the Jews and the Romans of that time that killed this Messiah. So instead of living like that, it says that you be led by the Spirit of life in 8 verse 14. It says that you are now joint heirs with the Messiah. Nothing can separate us from his love, in 8 verse 39. And then this leads to another small section, 9:1 through 11:36. 9:1 through 11:36, and this now turns the focus to the relationship between Israel and God. So he's addressing those two main issues. Are we morally indifferent, or are we really concerned about the way we live? If we know that we're not going to fulfill the law, and he says yes, we do. There's another route. It's the route of the law of the Spirit of life. And then secondly, he says, well, what about then Israel? Is Israel just failed and now it's being dumped? Is it being transformed? Is it being what's going on? He does claim that, hey, fulfilling the law in Christ means that God has been faithful to everybody, not that God is dumping what he had promised before, but he said that in fulfilling the law of Christ, he's actually fulfilled all of the promises. Everything that both Jews and Gentiles have been seeking has been fulfilled. It's been shown, it's been demonstrated right there in the flesh. So the longings, all these dreams of the life that the human beings would want to have and seek has been fulfilled in this Christ. And it's not partial, it's not dumping one person for the other, it's opening everybody up for it. And then lastly, we lead to the third part of the letter, 12:1 to 15:3, that is in substance. And this is an appeal and an exhortation, And he ends, of course, chapter 11 with the statement that, hey, his mercy has been given to everybody. And we've made that clear, to Jew and Gentile. And he starts 12 verse 1. If you live by the mercies of God, that is, if you live by everything that I've written up to this point, then do not be conformed to this age, but be renewed, be renewed by the transformation of your mind, so that you can discern the will of God. So he's actually making a positive claim, a powerful claim, an injunction, a call that you are not to sit around and enjoy the generosity of this God. You are to have it animate your life dynamically, so that you now are actually searching for God's will. You are discerning it and then fulfilling it. That God is active in our history, in this history, to transform it to the good, to his reign. Of course, this leads to some statements about the relationship between the Jews and the Gentiles. There's already a lot to be said about the Jew-Gentile relationship in Acts. Through all the letters, it seems to show up in a number of different ways, and here it shows up again. He states in 14, 1 through 12, he argues for the mutual acceptance, on matters of the law. between the Jews and the Gentiles, and even between Jews and other Jews that had become Christians. He says, welcome one another as Christ welcomed you. Of course, in Romans, later on in Romans 12 and Romans 13, there's this powerful ethical thrust that is meant to set up the example in the life of Christ as one that breaks apart the violent mode of life, that instead of attacking the enemies, it asks to feed and to care for the enemies. He's really establishing a new framework for life, a new avenue, a new road, a new way that picks up really the pieces of the law and tries to establish something new, and to fulfill what all of these laws have always sought to the righteousness, the justice that they've all pointed toward but could not embody themselves, that could not fulfill themselves. And so this really opens a new way for holiness and new relationships in the world. And that Romans 12 and 13, right towards the end, makes that clear. So I hope this is a good start to your study of the letter to the Romans. Again, the three sections, or the few sections that I mentioned were 1 through 15, 1:16 to 4:25, 5:1 to 11:36, and 12:1 to 15:3. Read those sections and see what other smaller subheadings you can develop within those sections, and try to get at some of the more really some of the more compelling and really very challenging aspects of his arguments. Enjoy.